The wind howled through the endless plains, the dust swirling in every direction as if the very earth itself was fighting against the coming storm. It was 1889, and the town of Redford, tucked deep within the heart of the American West, was a place where survival was more than just a daily struggle. It was a way of life. The frontier was unforgiving, especially in the dry months, when the land cracked open like an old, neglected book. Lydia Thompson stood at the window of the small, humble house she had inherited after her parents' untimely passing. The house creaked under the weight of the wind, but Lydia's thoughts were elsewhere. Her mind wandered to the past, to the days before the death of her family, when life had been simple and filled with promise. Now, the promise was broken, nothing more than a distant memory. Her fingers nervously traced the edges of a letter she had just received. The words were still fresh in her mind, even if the meaning was not. A neighbor, someone she hardly knew, had written to tell her of a boy, an orphan, who had recently lost his parents to an outbreak of fever. The boy, he wrote, had no one left to care for him, and without any relatives to claim him, he would be sent to an orphanage in a faraway city, a place Lydia knew would swallow his spirit whole. Lydia clenched the letter in her hand, her knuckles white. She'd never been the type to take in strangers, especially children. But this was different. There was something in her heart, a tug she couldn't explain. Her parents had always said, if you ever have the chance to help, do it without hesitation. But was she ready? Was it even wise to take on such a responsibility? Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud knock at the door. Lydia jumped, startled by the suddenness of it. She opened the door, half expecting the wind to be the source of the noise, but standing there, just outside the threshold, was a man she had never seen before. He stood tall, his weathered face partially hidden beneath the brim of a wide-brimmed hat. His clothes were dusty, his boots scuffed from years of hard labor, but it was his eyes that captured Lydia's attention. They were intense, burning with a depth of sorrow and determination that was all too familiar to her. They were eyes that had seen too much. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said, his voice rough from travel. "I'm looking for a woman named Lydia Thompson. I'm not sure if I have the right house, but I was told she might be able to help." Lydia blinked, taken aback. "Help? I don't understand." The man shifted, glancing behind him before stepping closer, lowering his voice. "I know about the boy, the one who lost his parents. Before he could finish, Lydia felt her heart race, a mix of fear and urgency flooding her chest. "Come." The letter had been nothing more than a quiet cry for help, and yet here this stranger was, standing in her doorway, offering her a chance to make a difference. But the weight of what he was asking, was she truly ready to take on a child? Could she be the one to give him a home? The man seemed to sense her hesitation, his eyes softening. "It's not an easy thing, I know, but I've seen too many children lost, forgotten. I can't let that happen to this one." Lydia swallowed hard, her gaze flickering to the letter in her hand. The storm outside raged louder, as if the world was daring her to make a choice. "Please," the man said, his voice pleading now. "He needs someone, and I think you're the one who can help." Lydia took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. As she looked into his eyes, something shifted within her. Maybe it was the kindness in his voice, or maybe it was the sheer despair of the situation. But whatever it was, she knew she couldn't turn him away. Without a word, she stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. "Come in," she said softly. I'll help him. Lydia watched as the stranger stepped inside, his presence instantly filling her small home. He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair peppered with hints of silver. His strong jaw and piercing eyes held shadows of a past he kept hidden, but Lydia was too distracted by the boy who stood behind him, nearly obscured in the man's shadow. The child stepped forward hesitantly. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with sandy blonde hair tousled from the journey, his blue eyes wide and filled with uncertainty. His face bore traces of recent tears, but there was also a quiet resilience, something that tugged sharply at Lydia's heart. "This is Jacob," the man said gently, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's thin shoulder. "Jacob, this is Miss Lydia Thompson." Jacob lifted his gaze timidly. "Ma'am?" he whispered, barely audible above the howling wind outside. Lydia knelt down so that she was level with him, a gentle smile on her lips. "Hello, Jacob. You're safe now. We'll get you settled and warm, all right?" Jacob nodded slowly, his small hand gripping tightly to the hem of his shirt. Lydia straightened and looked toward the stranger, suddenly aware she didn't even know his name. "I'm sorry, Mr. Grayson," he replied softly. "Grayson Cole." "Mr. Cole," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "Thank you for bringing Jacob to me." His eyes softened momentarily, then grew distant once more. "It's the least I could do." Outside, the storm intensified, a violent reminder of the harsh world they inhabited. Lydia quickly moved into action. "Wouldn't be wise to head out now." He seemed conflicted, but eventually nodded in agreement. "If it's no trouble, I'll stay a while." As Lydia prepared warm tea and biscuits, she noticed Jacob's eyes following Grayson carefully, as if the boy found comfort and reassurance in the man's silent strength. Yet there was something else beneath Jacob's innocent gaze, a lingering sadness, a yearning for stability. She watched as Grayson kneeled before the child, quietly murmuring words of encouragement. Lydia felt a gentle stir within her. This man, though roughened by life's blows, clearly had a heart tender enough to care deeply for this child's fate. Curiosity filled her. Why did he seem so personally invested in Jacob's well-being? Later, as Jacob dozed near the warmth of the fire, Lydia approached Grayson, her voice soft and hesitant. "You seem to know Jacob very well." Grayson shifted uncomfortably. "I knew his father. We were partners once, miners searching for silver. Life was harsh, but we trusted each other. When the fever took him and his wife, I promised I'd see Jacob to safety." Lydia nodded, her gaze lingering on Grayson's weathered face. "It's admirable. But why me? Why bring him to a woman you've never met?" Grayson paused, his eyes searching hers. "I asked around. People spoke of your kindness, your strength despite your losses. They said if anyone could help Jacob heal, it would be you." His words touched Lydia deeply, but before she could respond, the wind slammed against the house violently, rattling the windows. Jacob startled awake with a cry, fear etched across his small face. Grayson and Lydia rushed to his side simultaneously. Lydia took Jacob's trembling hand, her voice soothing. "It's all right, Jacob. Just the storm. It can't hurt you." "I'm scared," Jacob whispered, eyes filled with vulnerability. Grayson spoke softly, reassuringly. "It's okay to be scared, son, but you're not alone anymore." Jacob looked between the two adults, then curled closer, grasping Lydia's hand tightly. Warmth blossomed in her heart, mingling with an unexpected ache. She hadn't anticipated feeling so deeply connected to this fragile boy, or to the mysterious, gentle man who had brought him into her life. Later, As Jacob drifted back to sleep, Lydia found herself alone with Grayson. The fire crackled softly between them, casting gentle shadows across their faces. "You care deeply for Jacob," Lydia observed quietly, daring to meet his gaze. "You could have just left him at an orphanage, but you didn't." Contact startled them both, and Lydia withdrew quickly, her cheeks warming. Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and delicate tension. Finally, Grayson broke the quiet. "You're doing something good here, Lydia. This boy, he needs someone exactly like you." Lydia smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "Maybe I need him, too." As the firelight flickered gently around them, she caught a glimpse of something shifting in Grayson's expression. Respect, gratitude, and maybe even the faintest glimmer of something more. But before she could consider it further, a loud pounding shook the door violently. Lydia's heart raced. Who could possibly be out in such a storm? And what trouble had found its way to her doorstep now? Grayson quickly stood, placing himself protectively between Lydia and the door. With a deep breath, he reached out, opening it just enough to peer into the darkness. In the stormy night, silhouetted against flashes of lightning, stood a man Lydia never thought she'd see again, her former fiancé, presumed dead 3 years earlier. "Lydia," the man whispered urgently, eyes wild with desperation. "I need your help." Lydia's heart nearly stopped, frozen in shock at the face illuminated by lightning. It was Thomas, her former fiancé, the man she'd mourned, buried in memories and grief for 3 long years. Rain cascaded over him, drenching his clothes, making his already desperate appearance even more haunting. "Thomas," Lydia breathed, disbelief shaking her voice. "How?" He stepped inside without invitation, eyes darting nervously to Grayson, whose posture tightened protectively. Jacob stirred again from his spot near the fire, his wide eyes flickering between the adults. "Lydia," Thomas repeated, reaching out to grasp her hand. She pulled away instinctively, wary, uncertain of who this man had become. His gaze hardened, reflecting the shadow of a life she no longer knew. "You died," Lydia whispered, her voice a tremulous echo of past heartache. "They found your horse, your jacket covered in blood. You disappeared. I buried you in my heart." Thomas's expression softened, guilt flashing across his features. "I had to vanish. Things happened, things I couldn't control. If I hadn't left, you'd have been dragged down with me." Grayson stepped forward protectively, eyes narrowed. "You'd better explain yourself quickly." Thomas glanced warily at Grayson. "Who are you?" "A friend," Grayson replied firmly, positioning himself subtly between Thomas and Lydia. "Someone who's here to ensure no harm comes to Lydia or the boy." Thomas shook his head impatiently, urgency sharpening his tone. "There's no time for jealousy or explanations. Lydia, I'm being hunted. Men from San Antonio, they think I stole something valuable, something worth killing over. They'll stop at nothing," pleaded desperately. "Just shelter, one night. By dawn, I'll be gone forever, I swear." The silence in the room was oppressive, broken only by the howl of wind and the rhythmic drip of rain. Lydia hesitated, torn between compassion and suspicion. Finally, she nodded reluctantly. "Just tonight," she agreed softly, "but you'll leave before sunrise." Grayson's jaw tightened in silent protest, yet he said nothing, respecting Lydia's decision. His stance never shifted from its protective vigilance. As Lydia prepared another bedroll for Thomas, she sensed Grayson's gaze on her. Turning, their eyes met. A quiet connection sparking between them, a silent reassurance that somehow gave her strength. In the late hours, Jacob once again slipped into sleep, oblivious to the adults' tension. Lydia sat quietly beside the fire, lost in thought, when Grayson approached gently. "I don't trust him," Grayson murmured softly, his voice thick with concern. "He brings trouble. You deserve better than ghosts from your past." She sighed heavily. "Thomas was my first love. I mourned him for years, and now I feel only confusion." Grayson's eyes reflected quiet understanding. "Our past shapes us, Lydia, but it doesn't define us. I've spent my life running from who I was. Meeting you, seeing how you've embraced Jacob, it's shown me something important. Our futures are still unwritten." His words, tender and sincere, melted through her lingering doubts. Lydia looked deeply into his eyes, the warmth of newfound trust blossoming between them. Meanwhile, in the corner, Thomas watched silently, envy darkening his expression. The man who had returned was changed, hardened, embittered. A quiet storm brewed inside him, emotions of regret and jealousy intertwining dangerously. Hours later, the storm finally began to subside. Lydia, emotionally exhausted, drifted into restless sleep beside Jacob. Grayson remained vigilant, his eyes rarely leaving Thomas, who now pretended sleep but secretly studied the stranger who had entered Lydia's life in his absence. In the fragile light of early dawn, Lydia awoke abruptly to hushed voices. She crept quietly toward the kitchen, catching the angry whispers between Thomas and Grayson. "You should never have returned," Grayson said firmly, voice low and resolute. "You've put Lydia and the child in danger." Thomas's voice was raw, desperate. "I didn't have a choice. These men, they're ruthless. If I don't get out of here, Lydia won't be safe." Lydia stepped forward, startling both men. "What men, Thomas? What did you do?" He hesitated, eyes filled with shame. "I gambled," quietly but firmly. "Right now, if you ever cared for me at all, Thomas, don't bring your darkness into our lives." Thomas stared at her sadly, regret and loss evident in his eyes. Without another word, he turned and vanished out the door, swallowed by the fading darkness. Grayson moved swiftly to Lydia's side, a steadying presence. "It's going to be all right," he murmured reassuringly. She leaned into his comforting strength, overwhelmed by the surge of relief and emotion. "Will it?" Grayson's gentle touch grazed her shoulder, guiding her gaze upward until their eyes locked. "I won't let anything happen to you or Jacob. You have my word." His promise settled deep into Lydia's heart, planting seeds of hope. But even as the dawn broke through the lingering clouds, she couldn't help but feel unease. Thomas's warning echoed within her. Danger was coming, and there was no telling how soon it would arrive. Yet despite the uncertainty, one truth shone clearly. Lydia was no longer alone. Beside her stood Grayson, steadfast and gentle, and within her home slept Jacob, a boy whose presence had begun mending wounds she didn't realize still ached. But as daylight flooded her home, a shadow appeared on the distant horizon. A group of riders, approaching fast, bringing with them the promise of conflict and a reckoning Lydia feared she was not prepared to face. Sunlight pierced through lingering storm clouds, illuminating the plains in stark brilliance. Lydia stood on the porch, her heart hammering, eyes locked on the approaching riders. Beside her stood Grayson, solid and unwavering. Behind them, Jacob watched nervously, clutching Lydia's skirts. Grayson turned calmly toward Lydia, his voice steady despite the looming threat. "Take Jacob inside, lock the doors and stay hidden." Fear tightened Lydia's throat, but she shook her head resolutely. "I won't leave you to face this alone. Whatever comes, we face it together." A faint, proud smile curved Grayson's lips. "Then stay close." As the riders approached, Lydia counted 3 rugged-looking men, their faces shadowed beneath wide-brimmed hats. They halted sharply before the house, horses stamping restlessly. One rider moved forward, a man whose eyes burned with menace, scars tracing across his weathered cheek. "You folks seen a gambler named Thomas?" He barked harshly, eyes roaming suspiciously over Lydia and Grayson. Grayson's expression remained impassive. "He's not here. He left before dawn." The man dismounted, boots crunching heavily on gravel as he advanced toward them. "Well now, that's mighty convenient. Thomas owes us, a debt we're fixin' to collect." Lydia stepped forward boldly, her voice trembling yet defiant. "Thomas left. Whatever debt he owes, it has nothing to do with us." The man's gaze shifted coldly toward her. "Here." His eyes narrowed skeptically. "Seems Thomas had different ideas. Said you were special to him, someone worth protecting. Sounds to me like you might know more than you're saying." Tension coiled between them, thick as summer heat. Grayson instinctively stepped between Lydia and the men, posture rigid. "She told you the truth. Thomas came seeking help, but we sent him away. Your quarrel ain't with us." The scarred man studied Grayson thoughtfully. "You're brave, stranger. But bravery won't stop bullets." Suddenly, Jacob emerged from the doorway, small fists clenched, eyes wide with courage beyond his years. "Leave them alone!" he shouted defiantly. "They didn't do anything wrong." Lydia's heart lurched in panic, but Jacob's bravery seemed to catch the men off guard. Even the leader hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his harsh expression. "Boy's got nerve," the man muttered darkly, eyeing Jacob. "A shame Thomas wasn't as honorable as his friends seemed to be." For a long moment, silence stretched painfully, broken only by the wind whispering across the prairie. Then, unexpectedly, hoofbeats thundered closer. Another rider emerged, this time Thomas himself, face grim with resolve. "Wait!" Thomas shouted urgently, reining in sharply beside the confrontation. He raised his hands slowly, palms open in surrender. "These people aren't involved. I'm the one you want." Lydia's breath caught sharply. She hadn't expected Thomas to return, to risk himself for them. Thomas met Lydia's eyes, regret and apology clear in his expression. "I caused this trouble, Lydia. You deserved better. I'm sorry." The scarred man moved forward cautiously. "Where's what you took?" Thomas reached slowly into his saddlebag, pulling out a small leather pouch, tossing it at their feet. "Everything's there. Just let them go." The leader retrieved it swiftly, inspecting the contents. Satisfied, he nodded, tension easing slightly. A man ought to settle his own debts without dragging innocent folks into his mess. Remember that next time, gambler. With a final glare at Thomas, the men remounted, disappearing swiftly back across the prairie. The silence left behind was deafening, filled only with relief and lingering tension. Thomas turned apologetically toward Lydia and Grayson. "I meant what I said. I never intended harm." Lydia sighed softly. "Thank you, Thomas, for coming back." He nodded gently. "Be happy, Lydia. You deserve it." Without another word, he rode away once more, this time leaving peace behind rather than sorrow. As evening settled softly across the plains, Lydia sat on the porch watching Jacob chase fireflies, his laughter warm and in his gaze. "I never intended to stay, never believed I had anything worthwhile to offer anyone. But being here with you and Jacob, it feels right, like home." Lydia's heart swelled. Maybe home isn't a place, it's people. People we choose, people we hold on to. Slowly, Grayson reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, sending warmth coursing through her. "I'd like to hold on to you both, Lydia, if you'll have me." Her eyes shimmered with tears as she leaned into him. "We've all been broken by life, Grayson. Maybe together we can find healing." He cupped her cheek tenderly, eyes soft with devotion. "Then let's mend together." Beneath the gentle glow of twilight, Grayson leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to Lydia's lips, sealing a silent promise of love and new beginnings. From the fields, Jacob's joyful shout echoed, laughter floating gently on the evening breeze, a perfect harmony to the newfound peace enveloping them. In that tender moment, Lydia realized the past, with all its pain and loss, had led them precisely here, to this small, cherished place in each other's hearts. Together, they had become a family, forged not by blood, but by choice and courage, by compassion and love. And beneath the wide-open sky, stars blinking softly into existence, Lydia knew with unwavering certainty that no storm, no shadow of the past, would ever again threaten the precious haven they'd built together. She smiled warmly at Grayson, her heart at peace. Love had found them quietly amidst chaos, binding their broken pieces into something stronger, something beautiful. And this time, Lydia knew, it would stay forever.